Have you ever had that moment where something you believed for years just suddenly didn't make sense anymore? Maybe it was a childhood idea, like realizing the tooth fairy wasn't quite who you thought, or a more grown-up belief about how the world really works. That little click in your mind, that shift, is where we're starting today, because we're going to talk about a man named John Perkins, and a story he tells about power, one that might just make a few of your own beliefs shift a little. John Perkins spent a big part of his life working as what he calls an economic hitman. His job, in the simplest terms, was to convince countries around the world to take on enormous loans for huge development projects. Things like power plants and highways, loans they could never really pay back. And when they inevitably couldn't pay, his company, and others like it, would step in and demand something else instead. Not just money, but access to their resources, favorable trade deals, or political support. It was a system designed to make sure these countries remained permanently in debt and under control. The core idea he presents is that this wasn't just random greed. It was a systematic, quiet takeover. It was a coup, but not with soldiers and tanks. It was done with contracts and calculators, making corporations and the handful of people who run them more powerful than the governments of the nations they targeted. You probably recognize that stubborn feeling of being right, that inner voice that digs in its heels when someone challenges an idea you hold dear. We all have it. It's our instinct to protect our worldview, to keep things simple and familiar. This is the natural tension we all live with, the fight between that quick, defensive thinking and a slower, deeper awareness that is willing to question things. Many of us cling to familiar ideas because they make us feel safe and smart. The idea that our economies are basically fair, that big companies are just trying to make a product people want, that if a country is poor, it's probably due to its own mistakes. These are comfortable thoughts. They're the childhood beliefs of our society. But Perkins asks us to look closer, to engage that deeper awareness. He says, we economic hitmen really created the world's first truly global empire. And we did it primarily without the military, without colonialism. We did it through economics. This one quote changes the entire game. It moves the story from a simple tale of corruption to a blueprint of a system. It suggests that the immense power of massive corporations isn't an accident or a side effect of doing good business. It was, and is, the entire point for a small group of people at the very top. The goal was influence and control on a global scale, and they found a brilliantly quiet way to achieve it. This is where we have to get honest with ourselves. It's easy to hear a story like this and think it's about a few bad guys in a faraway boardroom. It's much harder to see how we might be fooling ourselves into supporting the very system he describes. We do it when we shrug and say, that's just how the world works, accepting it as an unchangeable fact. We do it when we believe a catchy commercial telling us a mega corporation cares about the environment without looking at their actual record. We do it when we assume that if a product is cheap and convenient, the true cost to the environment, to workers in other countries, to our own health, isn't our problem. We want to believe we are smart and independent, but often we are following a script written for us, one that encourages us to consume and not question. John Perkins's principles gently reveal this self-deception. He shows us that power doesn't always announce itself with a bang. It often whispers, offering us convenience and comfort in exchange for our attention and our compliance. It uses the language of growth and progress to mask its true ambitions. And the most powerful trick it ever pulled was convincing so many of us that it wasn't even there, that we were all just making free choices in a free market. Understanding this, truly letting it in, isn't about feeling cynical or hopeless. It's the opposite. It's about that moment of clarity, like realizing the tooth fairy wasn't real. It's not a loss of magic. It's the gain of a new, more real understanding. You start to see the strings, and once you see them, you can't unsee them. You begin to ask different questions, to look for the real story behind the official one. This cracks open a whole new way of seeing the world around us. A world where the real power isn't always where we've been taught to look. We start this journey in a place of comforting simplicity, where the rules seem clear. Governments make the laws, and companies follow them. We vote for leaders who are supposed to represent our interests, and we assume that the economic playing field, while not perfectly level, is at least governed by a recognizable set of rules. It's a straightforward narrative, and it feels stable. Our reactions here are often just as simple, a kind of knee-jerk response to any challenge to this order. If a big company does something we don't like, we might get angry and demand the government step in and regulate them. It's a simple call and response, a belief that the system as we understand it will ultimately correct itself if we just apply enough pressure in the right places. But then we enter the confusing middle, and this is where the journey gets difficult. This is the phase where the simple story begins to fray at the edges. We start noticing that the government regulators often come from the very industries they're supposed to police, and then return to those industries afterward. We see legislation that seems to be written by corporate lobbyists. We feel the pressure of a job market that demands more while offering less security. And we witness massive corporations paying little to no tax, while enjoying the benefits of public infrastructure. Most of us feel uneasy during transitions like this, when the old map no longer matches the new territory. According to Perkins, this is the critical challenge, the point where we are confronted with the uncomfortable reality that the system is not broken. It is operating exactly as designed for a different set of beneficiaries. The old knee-jerk reactions don't work here. Getting angry and simply yelling for government to fix a problem becomes frustrating because the lines have become so blurred. You might be someone who resists change at first, wanting to cling to the simpler story because the complexity of the new one feels overwhelming and even frightening. This middle phase is defined by this friction, this sense of being lost in a maze where the walls keep shifting. It is precisely in navigating this tough middle, however, that a new clarity begins to emerge. This isn't about finding a new simple answer to replace the old one. It's about developing a more sophisticated understanding, a thoughtful response that replaces the old knee-jerk reaction. Perkins's contrast is key here. The knee-jerk reaction is to see corporations as villains and governments as potential heroes, or vice versa. The thoughtful response is to see the deeply integrated relationship between the two, to understand that power has coalesced into a new form that transcends these old categories. You may catch yourself pausing before reacting lately, not immediately accepting the simple narrative presented in the news. This pause is the beginning of that new clarity. We start to see the mechanisms of the silent coup, not as a shadowy conspiracy, but in the everyday realities, in the fine print of a user agreement we click without reading, in the way our cities are shaped by commercial development deals, in the political ads funded by anonymous corporate donations. This new understanding is empowering because it is accurate. It moves us from being frustrated spectators to more aware participants. We stop demanding that a captured system fix itself and begin to understand the depth of the change required. The journey ends not with a simplistic solution, but with a clear-eyed recognition of the landscape of modern power, giving us the foundational knowledge we need to even begin thinking about what a truly democratic future could look like. Through this discomfort, we begin to realize that the tightness in our chest, the constant background hum of anxiety, isn't just a personal failing or a random affliction. It's a signal. It's the friction of an old skin, a way of being that has served its purpose, but is now too small for the person we are becoming. This realization doesn't make the discomfort vanish, but it changes everything about how we relate to it. Instead of an enemy to be numbed or a flaw to be hidden, it becomes a teacher, a gentle, if persistent, nudge from our deepest self, saying, "Look here, pay attention. There's something more for you." This process of paying attention is rarely a grand, cinematic epiphany. It's far quieter and more mundane. It happens in the small moments. It's catching yourself mid-sentence in an old, familiar story you tell about your limitations and realizing you don't quite believe it anymore. It's the inexplicable urge to take a different route home, to finally clear out that cluttered drawer, to listen to a genre of music you've always dismissed. These are not random acts. They are the first, tentative steps of a new self trying on its legs, testing the ground of a new reality. It's the psyche's way of practicing choice, of flexing a muscle that has long gone unused. You'll likely find daily decisions coming easier, not because life gets simpler, but because the internal noise that made every choice feel so weighty begins to quiet down. The fear of choosing wrong, of missing out, of not being enough for the path not taken, starts to lose its power. It's not that you suddenly have all the answers. It's that you become more comfortable with the questions. You start to trust that the next right step will reveal itself in the doing, not in the endless pre-doing analysis. That meeting you were dreading might still be challenging, but the knot in your stomach beforehand is less intense. The criticism that would have ruined your week now feels like a single piece of data, not a definition of your worth. It's a subtle but profound shift from living in reaction to living in response. Many notice old frustrations don't bother them as much. The traffic jam, the long line at the grocery store, the Wi-Fi cutting out at an inopportune moment. These daily irritants begin to lose their edge. It's not that you've achieved some zen-like state of perpetual calm. It's that your sense of self is less entangled with the immediate flow of events. Your happiness is no longer held hostage by things outside your control. You start to see these interruptions for what they are: minor inconveniences, not personal attacks, or signs that the universe is against you. This creates a spaciousness within your day, little pockets of breath where there used to be only tension. You might even find yourself smiling at the absurdity of it all, a quiet observer in your own life, rather than its frantic protagonist. This shift is deeply connected to how we see ourselves in the stories we've been told. For so long, many of us have been living inside a personality profile we accepted, a horoscope we read once, a label given to us in childhood, or the expectations of our family or culture. We've contorted ourselves to fit these descriptions, believing they were fixed and true. This is the heart of the Barnum effect, our willingness to accept vague general personality assessments as uniquely accurate, and then, unconsciously, to live up to them. We become the shy one, the disorganized one, the anxious one, because we've been told we are, and we see the evidence everywhere. But what if that evidence was just us conforming to a story? As we walk through this discomfort, we start to see the seams in that story. We see the choices we made to uphold it. We notice the times we stayed quiet to be the shy one, or the times we created chaos to be the disorganized one. And in that noticing, an incredible power is born, the power of choice. We realize we are not the character in the story. We are the author, and an author can edit. They can change the plot. They can even rip out the page and start a new chapter entirely. This isn't about denying our nature. It's about discerning what is truly our nature and what is just a costume we've worn for so long we forgot it wasn't our skin. This authorship is a gradual awakening. It's not a single decision, but 1,000 tiny reclamations of self. It's choosing to speak up, even when your voice shakes, because the story of being shy no longer gets to write your life. It's taking 5 minutes to make your bed in the morning, not because you're suddenly a neat freak, but because you're rewriting the narrative of being disorganized, one small action at a time. It's feeling the rise of anxiety, and instead of falling into the well-worn story of "I can't handle this," you take a breath and simply say, "I am feeling anxiety, and I'm still here." You separate the feeling from the identity. The feeling is a weather pattern passing through. The identity is the sky, vast and unchanging. You are the sky. This journey inward, this reclamation of authorship, is what true freedom feels like. It's not a freedom from responsibility or difficulty, but a freedom within it. It's the freedom to choose your response, to define your experience, to no longer be a puppet jerked around by external validation and outdated self-concepts. It's the profound and deeply personal realization that you were never broken. You were just buried under layers of stories that weren't yours, expectations you didn't choose, and definitions that were always too small to contain the vastness of who you are. And as we peel back those layers, one by one, we arrive at a feeling so simple and so profound that it can only be understood through experience. It's the feeling John Perkins described when he spoke of freedom not as a grand political concept, but as a personal, physical reality. It is the deep, soul-level relief of finally taking off a pair of shoes that never quite fit. You never knew how much they pinched, how they altered your gait and caused a constant low-grade ache, until you finally slip them off. And in that moment, you stand barefoot on the solid earth, feeling the ground beneath you for the first time in years, and you understand that this unencumbered, authentic connection to yourself and the world is what you were searching for all along. Together, we discover that this journey wasn't about finding something new outside of ourselves, but about returning to something ancient and true within. It was about remembering who we were before the world told us who we should be. And in that remembering, we find not just solace, but a vibrant, creative power. We find the courage to build a life that feels like home, a life that fits not like a stiff, formal suit, but like a favorite, well-worn sweater. It's a life where our daily actions are in alignment with our inner truth, where our relationships are built on authenticity rather than expectation, and where our challenges are met with a resilience born from self-knowledge. We step forward, not with all the answers, but with a deeper trust in the questions, and a heart full of gratitude for the messy, beautiful, and endlessly unfolding journey of being human.